I want to welcome you to the Harvestworks live streaming event series. My name is Carol Parkinson, and I am the director of our nonprofit Digital Media Arts Center in New York City. Our collaboration with Experimental Intermedia continues with our fourth Zoom-in OLAP, also known as the Online Live Art Performance Community Discussion Forum. For this event, we've invited artist Kat Mustatea to talk about her works and also about EdgeCut, a monthly performance series curated by Kat and Heidi Boisvert that explores our complex relationship to the digital and, since COVID, to the virtual. Following a discussion, presentation by Kat and a question and answer period from you, the audience, the forum will be open to anyone who would like to discuss online live art performance ideas or projects, as well as any technical or conceptual concerns. I'd like to tell you a bit about the artist. Kat Mustatea is an artist whose experiments with language and live arts stretch theater into the digital age. A playwright and technologist, she uses metaphors of transformation to craft live performances that investigate absurdity, misunderstanding, and what it means to be American. The discussion forum will be led by Katherine Liberovskaya of Experimental Intermedia, an intermedia artist and curator who will now introduce the event. Thank you.
So welcome everyone. And just a few words about OLAP in case anyone is here for the first time. Just briefly, it's a collaboration between Harvestworks and Experimental Intermedia that explores ways of rethinking live performance online, live art performance. So we try to include different forms of art. So of course, music and moving image, but also dance and performance art, theater. And so every 2 weeks, so we've been doing this Sundays every 2 weeks, we bring you a new guest who talks about their work, and which is followed by a question and answer period. And this is a discussion, a community discussion forum for anyone who wants to discuss anything else related to online live performance. So if you have any, if you want to share ideas, talk about projects, if you have any questions about technologies, there's things you want to do, you don't know how to do them, this is the place for them. So without further ado, we welcome Kat Mustatea.
Hi, thank you for having me. Thank you, Carol and Katherine. I've been to a couple of these and they have been really wonderful discussions. So I'm excited to be here.
Oh, just one question, Carol, are you in speaker view? Okay, great. Sorry.
Okay, so I'm gonna share my screen. Let's sound okay. Okay, so you should see my screen, right?
Yes.
All right. So as previously mentioned, I'm a playwright and technologist, and I co-curate EdgeCut with Heidi Boisvert. And what I'm going to talk about, we've been doing this series since January of last year, and I'm going to talk a little bit about where we started, because it was January pre-pandemic, and then where we ended up and the kind of conceptual shift that we had to make, moving from in-person to digital performance. So what is liveness online? Okay, well, so we early on in the pandemic series, early on in the pandemic, we were talking to this artist who we were hoping to program for a virtual performance. And she was saying, well, they had already put on this performance virtually. And what they'd done was like, it was a 4-person opera. And what they'd done was like, one of the performers couldn't be there that day. And they had just recorded her piece, right? And then she was able to join later. So she dressed up as she did, as she was dressed in the piece, to make it seem as though she had been there in the performance live, and she hadn't been. And this made me think about, you know, this idea of like, well, okay, then what is liveness if you can sort of fake performing live digitally? And then a second anecdote was also around the summertime. I'm talking to a theater colleague who is a performer. He's an actor, and his wife is also an actor. So they had created a show in which they could both act, and they had just gone to very elaborate lengths to turn their entire home upside down, to create stage sets. And they would like, by the summer, people had gotten very sophisticated in their use of Zoom performance. So they would like, during this live performance, they were like running from room to room, from set to set. And it was just this very dramatic effort to create really in real time the performance they had in mind. And he was telling me afterward, the audience and his friends and everyone was like, oh, so that was recorded, right? Because they had such high production value that that no one believed they had really pulled it off in real time. And so not only can you fake your presence in digital space, but also what he seemed to be saying is there's actually no incentive to be live in digital space. Like, what did we do all that for when we could have just pre-recorded it? So that's what this is really about. What is liveness? So I'll tell you a little bit about EdgeCut. Heidi and I started with the idea that we would present short pieces of performance in really any genre. So it could be music or dance or theater that somehow explore our relationship to cutting edge technology. So we're looking at robotics or AI or really any mode of performance. From the beginning, so we started in January 2020, we were incubated at New Inc., which is the art and tech incubator at the new museum, and we were making use of the space. So the image that you just saw was from one of the performances in that space. We were putting on a monthly show. So each show had about 4 pieces of live performance of some kind, up to 20 minutes. And we just curated everything around themes. So our first theme was absurdity, and then we did hybridity, and I was really looking forward to profanity, but we never got to do it. So we did, January, February, we even had March all programmed and ready to go, and had to stop. And as far as we knew, this was like sort of the end, like we were just building steam, and this was basically the end of our series. And we did talk quite a bit about, I'll tell you a little bit more about the kinds of stuff that we did. So here's the Absurdity lineup for each of the shows we had. In addition to the 4 live performances, we had like 1 thematic visual artist. So this is the visual artist we had, Sean Capone's very strange imagery. These are the 4 performances, and to give you a sense of the kinds of stuff that we would see. In the bottom right corner, that's Channy Choi. She gets on stage and brings this like ridiculous bulbous dress, and has this whole shtick about like getting the audience to help her put on this ridiculous dress. And it turns out that the dress is a controller for a video game. And so in order to control her character in the video game, she has to like jump in weird ways and contort her body, meanwhile in this bulbous outfit, which we felt we felt like it spanned very beautifully live and digital space, and also that it just really responded nicely to the theme of absurdity. So that is the kind of world we were operating in at the time. Here's our hybridity lineup and our hybridity show. Yeah, and I think right away we had really a very engaged community of performance artists and technologists. We really put out an open call, really just to our own networks. We didn't do a lot of promotion, but we got flooded with amazing, interesting proposals for shows. So it just looked like we could just do this every month for quite a while, and then we couldn't. Let's see. So where am I here? Oh, and yeah, here I'll play you like a little. This is only a minute long, but it's a nice capture. Yeah, and the music you hear is Roundhill May, who was one of the artists in the Absurdity show, the musician. So that was our Absurdity show. That's kind of how it looked. It was very salon-like, which was also satisfying because people really in real time, you know, the performance would happen and then people would just from the audience, like speak out questions that they had for the performers, and things happened very organically where we could present a show, but also have like the really exciting kind of discussion in between performances. And so, well, I won't skip to that just yet, but yeah, so then we had to shut down, and what happened was Heidi and I were looking at the spate of Zoom things and live streaming things that were suddenly cropping up, and we were like wondering, well, should we do this too? And I think we were both pretty reluctant to just jump into that because it felt like we so care about what live performance is that to just do a live stream felt like something. It's a different medium. So, and we felt like we didn't know live stream as a medium. We weren't set up to do live stream as a medium. So, so anything we might do would feel like maybe just a poor translation from one medium to the other. And we didn't want to do that. So we took some time to each go do our own projects and to have our own sort of artistic experiences because we were reluctant to, we wanted to understand what the field could be before we just sort of just do live stream. And so I'll just tell you two of the things I did in the meantime. We adjourned back in the summer, in late summer, and with very fresh ideas. I think there were a lot of ideas about liveness and digital space happening in this time. And it was a very rich set of discussions going on in a lot of corners, including the theatrical world. But so I'll just describe two of mine because I think when we adjourned, Heidi through her own artistic practice and me through mine, we came to some similar conclusions, which I think means that you know, these ideas were in the air at the time. So one of the things I did was I wrote an article about a performance of Oedipus Zoom done by Theater of War Productions, I believe they're called. So they really, you know, I felt that the show worked amazingly well. And I think I tried to write the article in order to try to understand for myself what was it that worked so well about this performance. And one thing about it was in the announcement for the show, it would be a reading of Oedipus Rex with famous actors, you know, Frances McDormand. I love Frances McDormand. So of course I want to watch this show. But in the announcement, they said, afterward, there will be a discussion and some members of the audience will be brought onto the, so-called digital stage to ask their questions and interact with the actors. So I, being a great Frances McDormand fan, was like, I definitely want to say something. I definitely want to take part in the discussion afterwards. And just the fact that I knew I would be elevated to that same digital stage, as the actors, made me pay attention differently, because I was like, well, I want to make sure I caught all the entire performance instead of going off to the next room to get a drink. I want to make sure that whatever I say is really on point, that I didn't miss anything. And also, like, if I'm going to be shown on camera, I want to put on lipstick. So I think the thing about the insight for me was that the minute that that you're doing something that looks more like a video conference and less like a live stream, you're engaging the audience differently. And for me, that really, so of course I wasn't called on. I actually didn't take part in the performance, but I paid attention differently because I could, because of that potential. And I think they did something really amazing there. So that was one discovery for me, that in digital space, well, so in in-person space, you're already there present, and your very presence is sort of interactive. But in digital space, the minute that you engage an audience as a sort of co-creative presence, then you really have their attention. And then second thing that I did in these months was that I had a performance of a play I had already written called The One and Only Amanda Palmer. It was produced by Project Y Theater. And the gist of the show was these young women who run into each other in a waiting area. There's two of them and they're dressed identically. They have the same designer clothes. And it turns out they're both named Amanda Palmer. And one of the like spectacle presentations, the spectacle part of this presentation was that we would have members of the audience who wanted to take part. We would have this montage where they would each be like, I'm Amanda Palmer, I'm Amanda Palmer. And so as when we promoted the show, we said, if you would like to take part in the audience, you can email this email and you might be chosen to take part that day. All you need, is if you identify as female and you have a red scarf. And immediately I even had a friend of mine text me. She was like, I want to take part, So the idea was that you have the actors, but then you at least give some members of the audience the opportunity to like be part of the spectacle and of the story, because it came out of the same ideas of engaging the audience. The thing about it was all fake. We faked it all. Like if you wrote to that email address, you'd get a nice email back that said, thank you, but we've already chosen our audience members. Sorry, it was by lottery. So besides the two actors, everyone else on screen was actually interns, who we pre-recorded. And we even, as part of like we also pre-recorded the artist talkback. And even in the shtick with the artist talkback, like the director would ask me questions. And at what moment she's just like, oh, and here are some questions in the chat from the audience. And she would ask me some question that she made up that was presumably from the audience. And what was so, it was too hard to do this show live. I wasn't even, available that day. And we were able to fake the entire thing. And I know it sounds a little brazen, like we were basically, how do we feel about deceiving our colleagues and our friends about the liveness of this? But in our discussions back and forth, we talked about, this is a Wild West moment where all of us are trying to we're attempting to create the illusion of liveness, even though everything was contrived, and like philosophically, we felt like ultimately, okay, well, all of theater is about fakery, so maybe it's okay to do this. But it was I think a second discovery for me, which is that you can have these like layers of engagement for participants, that you can give people the opportunity to really consume what they're seeing, but you can also give some people some opportunity to affect the outcome. And it doesn't have to be everyone. Not everyone has to participate for it to feel live. So those were my two like learning moments. And then Heidi and I met back over the summer, and we felt like we were ready to do new versions of EdgeCut and to discover, what that now could be in virtual space. So, so we had this thought, okay, if our performance series previously, it was about really conceptually, we started in live in-person space, and then we bring in how does any form of cutting edge technology affect those performance modes. Okay, why don't we now, we assume digital space. So let's look at what is unique about in-person performance. So liveness, gathering, embodiment. And what do those things mean for virtual space? And so basically what we did was kind of start at the other end of the spectrum. Like we really inverted conceptually what we were going for. And so we put out a very different kind of call for a very different kind of works. And we really invited the people in our community to propose things that are really getting at those three ideas: liveness, gathering, embodiment. And I think what came out of that, and I hope you sort of recognize those three elements in what we then ended up doing. So one of the things we did, our three themes that we picked were captivity, sanity, and humanity. We had open call, we had applications to the open call from 5 continents, which was a really unexpected and beautiful part of the virtual space, that before we had been very much New York centric, and now suddenly we were international in a really satisfying way. And we partnered with a 3D virtual space called Nowhere. There are a lot of such spaces now. Many of them are built on Mozilla hubs. And I've seen a number of these spaces. And I would have to say, so far from everything I've seen, Nowhere is by far the most visually lavish. So, so it's just gorgeous to look at and to be part of. And I'll start, and I'll tell you. So our first show was Captivity. Here's one of the rooms of the Captivity show. So, and then and you see that you appear in these rooms as a kind of a little Zoom nonagon. So your face is there, but you have to move through that space in order to interact with people or to get closer or further away. And there's spatialized sound, so it's quite beautiful. You can really approach a cluster of people and like hear their conversation, or go further away and not hear them as well. Here's a second room, so very different visually. These two styles were like room types of that were available at the time, but Nowhere has since added a number of different room types. And what this did very beautifully was it created a kind of an atmosphere that you could only get, you couldn't really get on Zoom, you couldn't get on a lot of live stream platforms, which was the sense that you're at a cocktail party, that you could freely move around the space and interact with people in a serendipitous way. You could get closer to this person, have a private conversation, or stand back and let people gather around and have a more public sort of discussion forum. And so what this place did, this venue, was that it helped create intimacy via the sound. It helped create serendipity, and it also created agency for the attendees. Like, you couldn't really just sit or, you know, like be in that space. You had to move around in order to have various experiences. The first show that we did, Captivity, had 4 rooms, and we deliberately programmed things in a staggered way so that you'd go from one room and then you'd have to go into the next room for the next performance. And we'd sort of like hop people into different rooms, but also give them a chance, if they wanted to skip one of the performances, they could linger on in a place where, you know, there were a couple of lingerers, and like have a little discussion, just like you might in a real venue. And then, so let me see, I wanna make sure I don't forget to say something. I'll refer to my notes here. Okay, yeah, so we ended up doing 2 shows, one in October and one in December. And I think we did some things right, and then we did some things in the first show, which we later figured out how to do better in the second show. So for example, in the first show, here's a view of you could put up these screens, right, in the space. And so we basically broadcast a performance that was into the space, and people were watching it, right? And that's very movie theater-like, but it's also doing, like, sticking pretty closely to the live stream format. It's so like, I think what we ended up doing much better the second time around is really using the peculiarities of the space itself and working more intimately with the artist to do things inside those spaces that were much less like live streaming and much more like a real gathering. So yeah, for here's our second show poster. This is a view of the forest room in Nowhere. As I said, they started adding gorgeous, just beautiful imagery in some of the rooms. So we use this room as like the lounge. We had somebody stationed there to be sort of like the person to chat with people, and then we would send people off into different rooms to do different things. Here's one of the same rooms configurations. We called it the cherry room. I don't know what it is exactly, but the venue started building out interesting functionalities between the two, from October to December. So by this show in December, they had built out what they called the God mic. So you could like make people big on their screens, and then so you could amplify them and the sound would amplify as well. So we would bring up a handful of people from the audience and lift them upward. And the artists, which you see on the right-hand side, are doing something interactive with the people that are up in the clouds. And then we would lower them down below and bring up other people to have this cloud experience with the artists, and then bring them down. So as you see, by December, we'd really like started to use the space itself and what it could do, and making that, deliberately building that into performance possibilities. Did I run out of? Oh, and here's, I will talk about this. I'll show you a video of this performance. Caitlin and Misha Yeah, I need to transfer to a video. Yeah, so I'll tell you a little bit about this show before I play a few minutes of it. This is Caitlin and Misha. They built what they called a digital piñata, and it was a worry piñata. So one part of the experience was that you could go online and hit the piñata and record your worries, and then hit the piñata and sort of release those worries out into the universe. And they adapted this digital piñata for our space. So they have projected the piñata, and they're also there. And I'll play a few minutes of how they engaged the audience. But the idea was they really invited people, you know, in their little nonagons. We were all gathered around. They invited people to shout out their own worries. And it became quite a communal experience. Some of it was funny, and some of it was really sort of emotionally charged in a very beautiful way. It's hard because, you know, it's still a video, so it's hard to just describe how kind of like exciting it was to take part in it. You'll hear people once they like the worries are released, they'll be like, wow, you know, like people were very engaged in a way that I think felt successful for us, because, and I think ultimately what working in these 3D environment helped us do is use the venue itself as a way to answer these questions that we had posed curatorially about, like, you know, liveness, intimacy, gathering. So I'll play about 10 minutes and you'll see what they're doing and how they're doing it.
Can you hear me?
Yes?
Yes.
Great. So many of you may have recorded a worry on the way in at worries.io, which will be part of our ever-growing archive of worries, and we will be posting, sorry, I'm getting a little bit of echo on my end, which we will be bashing shortly. But first, we'd like to take some time to hear what you are worried about here in this space, where we can see each other face to face, which is really something we aren't doing as much these days, at least in these physical forms. So I'm hoping you won't mind and you'll be comfortable when you're ready, just speaking a worry, whatever comes to mind.
I worry about the future of live performance.
Indeed.
Yeah, a good one.
I worry about my neighbors.
We're lucky to have you worrying about them.
Like any good host, I worry about people actually enjoying themselves while they're here. That was me.
We are.
Phew.
Phew.
I'm worried that I look dopey on my monitor here.
Oh, you don't. But appreciate you sharing that.
Hello, yes, I'm Corin Little, and I worry about how public space is going to be impacted by people living indoors, and how poverty is going to exacerbate violence, particularly in the US.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm worried about inequality becoming very ingrained.
Anyone else have a worry they'd like to share before we move on? Well, thank you for that. Do you want to give instructions for this?
Yeah, so for our next phase, we're going to be activating the infinite Oris Bash sculpture here that you see on the screens. And we've set up a special version that can be activated. Originally, it was by tapping the screen or hitting the space bar. Then it became motion activated in a touchless installation in Boston. And for this, we have a very special version that's actually activated by motion and sound so that it can be activated by you all. So what we're going to do is we're going to have each of you that once they hit the sculpture with the stick, actually count off to 3, and on 4, yell and move and create motion in your nanogon, which could be done easily by moving your fist forward or moving your hand forward as if you're hitting the sculpture with a stick. But it's the movement is not enough. You also have to make a loud noise.
I'm going to face you and I'm going to do it. Yeah.
I'm worried I won't be able to stop drinking.
Countdown will be even easier. Did you all hear that?
Yes.
Nice. So that was good, but it was also, if you want to do it without the countdown, that's great, but the countdown will help. Count to 3, and on the 4th, do it. So we'll do it one at a time. But we also have to, because of how this is set up, it has to be visible in my view. I think I can see everyone.
Yeah.
And what happens when you hit it is that you'll hear one of the worries from the recorded archive play back, as well as transcribe onto the cloud writing as well. And when we go through everyone, we'll be able to release the worries. That's what we want to get to, is we're bearing the weight of the worries collectively, and we're reaching for a collective discharge so that we can release the worries and be free of them even for a little while. So who would like to go first?
Oh, everyone's so shy.
So we'd love to go one person at a time.
Also, do you mind explaining again how we actually did it?
Yeah, so what you have to do is, as long as I see you here in this view, it can be captured through my camera. You count 1, 2, 3, go! This is a worry recorded by a dog. Yeah, go for it if you want to hit one.
1, 2, 3, go.
I worry that my children will live in a world that is no longer guided by principles of love and justice. I worry that my children's homes will be underwater.
Okay.
Wow.
1.
So I'll stop there. So the punchline to this whole thing is that, in fact, it was also all faked. that whole rigmarole around, you have to move your, make motion in your window and make a loud sound, that none of that was true. It was really about like Misha would, would like press a button and trigger the thing. Because we felt that it all you really needed was to create the sense that like what you do triggers something, and it didn't matter if it worked technically or not. But you just watched how sort of deliberately they set up this entire scenario, and they really walked people through, and you saw people like really participating in the worries and then it goes on from here. Like many people took their turns hitting the so-called piñata, and it was just experiencing it in real time was actually so moving and also funny and super strange. In a way I've never really experienced anything else before online. So for me, this felt like a really successful way of engaging people, creating something that is performative and theatrical, and making people feel like they're really present there in the moment with you. So I guess I'll just leave it there. I feel like that was part of like what we discovered along the way to curating a purely digital kind of theatrical experience. And I think Heidi and I are now moving into this year with the thought that we'd like to take both of those learnings from in-person real space and also from sort of theatrical ideas in digital space. And probably where we go from here with EdgeCut is, I think we'd like to look at hybrid formats, things that kind of engage both in interesting ways. So that's probably what our next open call will be about. And where we're interested in the themes of humanity. We carried that over from last year, and then interspeciality to play with this idea of hybridity in general. Okay, so I'll kind of stop there. There's more videos that I can show you, but also I'm interested in what others have to say. So
more videos.
Oh, you want more videos? I've got more videos.
Yes, please.
I can oblige. Okay, so this one is from, let me make sure it's, I'll put it at the right place. It's 328, 398. I should have set this up already ahead of time, but okay, we'll start there. This is from the first show in October. And this is one of the post performances. So we had the performance itself, and then we'd have the artist available right there to discuss and to ask questions. So we really tried to carry that over from the in-person way that we were doing the performances. And so this is just an example of like the sort of like the nice interactions that were happening in real time in this digital space as we're like chatting at post performance with the artist. You'll see like you'll see her turn a little bit and be like, oh, there you are, you're right behind me. It was so nice. Just these like little things that really felt like they're capturing the quirks of real interaction. Also, one of my favorite anecdotes about doing this was that at one moment when we were broadcasting on this screen the performance and everyone was turned to watch it, there was a conversation going on behind me. So I had to go take my little nonagon over to them and be like, and shush them, like you would do in a real venue. Like, you guys are being too loud, we can hear you. And it was such a, anyway, I found that very satisfying. So, okay, I'll play you a little bit from the
interesting to me. I don't know how I want to make of that yet. But we'll see as we explore more in online space. Yeah, I also feel like I am opening myself up to you when I perform something, show something, while being okay that you're not showing your face when I was performing. It's a different kind of dynamic than physical space.
I understand what you said about the screen, the intimacy, and the lack of intimacy and presence. Hi, with the flatness of the screen, but I think it's as I told previously, I don't think that having an AR or VR headset would change the situation in a way, and I don't feel that I want to see people with a lot of gears on their heads who just behave in the space. I'm more curious about the audio, maybe about binaural audio or ambisonic audio. Maybe that kind of that use of audio can recreate mentally an imaginary environment where the audience could feel more emotion, could feel at home. But as an audience, I have difficulties to watch a performance on the screen and say, "Oh, I'm here with the person." I need another element that create the sensitivity, the link between the performer, the screen, and the audience. And I think the audio is, we mostly all have headphones at home at the moment, so it's not a big ask. But maybe binaural could be a thing because it creates directly kind of a immersive environment. And I think it's to be still, stay still on the chair and watching a screen and someone doing something. The something has to be really special for you to take the time and feel, I want to be engaged with that. And I think it's not really an artist problem. It's more about the tools that we are using, and we have all the tools at the moment. It's just I think we focus and manufacture the focus on screens and cameras and telephones for years, and the sounds on telephone is still crap. It's still mono. So the idea is how we can create a stereo or binaural or something that create an environment, create an imaginary place. Because I think the idea is not to replace reality. We can't do that. Right. I think the challenge is to create an in-between world where we can feel like it's an adventure, but it's somewhere where we can find a balance and create link with other people.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting audio, because we're so visual.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you noticed during him speaking, there were a few people on the screen who disappeared, because that was one of the interesting things about the space, that you could just, if you wanted to leave, you just sort of, people would just disappear, and then, but the road to coming back into that room, you had to appear in a specific place and sort of like maneuver yourself all the way back to the group. It was a much longer path.
They disappeared because they weren't interested, whatever.
No, sometimes just technical issues. They might just, sometimes people would just disappear. And then they would have to like relog on, and sometimes, it was a platform at the time, it was in beta, so things would kind of get funky, and people's computers would get overextended. I can kind of keep skipping around to different parts. Sometimes the sound is not great, so our recording was not great. I mean, the sound was quite beautiful in the space, but just to give you a sense of the many rooms and the possibilities.
Worry room where the next is.
Maybe a few more excerpts, and then maybe we could.
Yeah. So you tell me when you've had enough.
That's just happening.
Nice to see the different spaces too.
So here's, I think Karen Wong is talking. She heads New York Live Arts. Or no, she's stopped talking. Maybe that's not so interesting.
Welcome to nowhere. I'm Robert.
I don't know what's happening there. Let's see, where were we here? Oh, this was during the cloud performance. The sound is a little funky, but that's the sound of a heartbeat, and the performers are kissing.
Okay.
Well, we missed the kissing part. There we go. Here they are kissing.
Is that his heartbeat or her heartbeat?
I think we had to do it pre-recorded. They preferred for it to be a live heartbeat, but we couldn't get it to work technically with the space. There was just too much that had to happen. So this was like their not as ideal scenario. And these are artists who do this really in person. They really have that data read from their bodies, and they also, I believe they take data off of observers as well as they're watching this intimate kissing. And so we worked a lot with them to figure out like how this might translate digitally. And the way we, sort of like a little innovation we came up with was that we would bring the observers up into this cloud place where there were only 3 or 4 observers who were watching, and then we would bring them back down and bring others up. So like to create within that like audience, to create a place that's even more intimate than the whole group. So, but unfortunately the sound like the recording, the sound is a little, it's hard to listen to a bit, but. And let's see, is this anything interesting? This was the post discussion. Yeah, I think maybe I'll just stop here.
Yeah, I have a feeling that there might be a lot of questions about.
Wonderful. And also these are the live stream are available. Both of them are available online if you want to kind of look at what we did.
Oh, could you post the link in the chat?
Oh yes, I can do that. I'll stop screen sharing maybe first. And so here's Sanity. And like I said, I do think that between the two, we learned a lot in this, and I do feel like the work and even how we were able to record it in the second, in the Captivity. No, I'm sorry. Captivity was the first one, and I think the sound quality and the overall like video of it it's hit or miss. There's some real sound fails in the recording. But then in Sanity, we were able to not only program more, I think, more voluptuous and interesting performances, but also we were able to just document it better. But even so, we had a lot of sound problems in general. It was a tricky thing to sort of capture. That was another question, like, how do you even document this? Because it's like things happening in space. So we had a stage manager really wandering around with one of these nonagons that functioned. We turned it into a camera. So one person would sort of like navigate through the space with a camera, capturing whatever she was looking at. And
sorry, can I interrupt you?
Yeah,
here?
sure.
Because that was part of my question. Because you have been archiving for the purpose of showing, presenting to others like us, I think. I was wondering, so whose standpoint is that? And you just said the answer. It was your like stage manager.
Yeah, we had, and it was really hard to figure out. It was quite a problem how to like where to point the camera at any given time.
That is my second part of question. What do you think about the act of archiving in terms of, you know, you are offering those 3D audio field and visual experiences, and I mean, archiving just your stage manager's standpoint, it's one way of capturing, but it's not the same, obviously. And also, I was a little puzzled, you know, by the fact that we are watching this in 2D, and this captured sound is a little like too. It shouldn't be like that. The guy who was talking about immersive audio actually more feeling like echo to his feeling. And he's so far, right? And why the hell we are hearing him so clearly? You know, if I'm hearing the archive, that makes me feeling like a little cheated.
And it's a shame. It was really so like I said, the space was a beta. It was in beta as we were really its first users, and some of the really beautiful spatial effects of the sound were things that were like the space itself was not set up for us. So we had a number of audio problems just during the live presentations. But then we also had very serious problems even creating recordings of this. And it's a shame because yes, you do get cheated of the real experience and of the beauty of the sound that you were able to experience in the space. We really thought of it as whatever you see in the live stream. And we beamed out, you know, to the world a live stream of this. But we felt like the live stream was not the thing, right? We felt like anything we're able to capture in the live stream is just going to be a poor representation. And what we sold tickets to, you know, what we really encouraged people to do was come to the space, being in that space, being able to maneuver around. That is the experience.
But that's how the real performance or whatever.
Yes.
Performance is too.
Yeah.
I mean, performance art lives via documentation, but the documentation is always a poor reflection of what actually happened.
But your actual participating people, audience, well, first layer of audience, they are required to wear the VR kind of gadget.
No.
How they're.
No, so this is all browser based.
Yeah, I was actually there. I did experience it, but I was one of the older computers that crashed.
Oh yeah.
So that was
there
a
was
little
a
bit difficult. But I wondered, is it a Mozilla Hub environment, and who programmed it?
Yes.
I understand that Nowhere created 5 or so different rooms, right? So then, and was it you and Heidi that programmed the interaction in the room, or how did that work? And how did you get hooked up with Nowhere?
And I'm going to add to that.
So many questions.
No, but I think it's kind of the same question. Is I was wondering how big the team that worked on it. Well, like, were you still doing this with New Museum, or just the two of you, or did you have like a whole team? And
yeah, sorry to disappoint you all. It was just me and Heidi. We had no team. We hired someone to help us basically run the show and help document. So she was the one running the camera. And that was it. That's all the staff that we had. And as for the space, yes, it's a Mozilla Hubs. There's a number of such spaces. They're very interesting sort of development recently. But I do think that the Nowhere is the most visually gorgeous. So I've seen a lot of other things. They have different kinds of sort of interactive possibilities. But as you saw, you can really take these saucers and come closer, like move really around the space with your little saucer. So the rooms that you saw were out of the box. We had spoken to them originally about, well, maybe down the line, we could actually create some 3D custom objects that we want to place in the spaces, or have a custom space just for us. But that in the beta version, that was actually not, no one had time for this, like we really we put together an entire performance in a month or two. So there wasn't really any time to customize the space. And I think the team at Nowhere didn't have the bandwidth to really do that with us. But it is a possibility, like one could do that theoretically. So what we ended up using was really out of the box, and what was available for us to do, like what features and functionalities there were, that was it. That's what we got. So we really had to play with, okay, how far can we stretch the things we're getting out of the box? And because we were literally the first users of this platform, everything we did was new.
And Nowhere are an art collective or?
Yeah, they're a company, actually. So I think their hope and their goal, I don't want to speak for Nowhere's goals, but they are a product, like that one can hire them to do a virtual event in. I think they've developed, since we used them in December, they've developed a number of new, very beautiful rooms that I haven't been to yet, but I will soon. And so the idea is, you hire it like you would any venue, right? And so you get some features out of the box. I suppose, probably you could discuss with them if you wanted to customize one of the spaces in interesting ways. That God mic feature where we brought people up to the sky, that was not available the first time around. And everything was a little clunky the first time around, and then things got smoothed out a little bit, but there were still some glitches.
I wondered, you had certain times where there were performers, and then you had the audience. I guess in the programming you were able to signify that the audience should watch the performance? And I mean, there's the audience and then there's the performers. Are they all considered equal, or do you give rights to some of the people and you don't give rights to other people?
Yeah, so the only distinction we were able to make is who got to do this amplify feature. So we were able to give some of the performers who wanted to make use of that feature, we gave them the possibility. We could also, what we were able to do but otherwise, yes, you're right. Everyone otherwise was equal, which was nice, because then, it really is like in an in-person space. Everyone's a body. Everyone's got their body and they're walking around with their body, right? But what we're able to do the second time around is that amplify feature. You could click on select audience members. I as the organizer could click on select audience members and amplify them. So I could bring them up to the level of the performers and then bring them back down, which was a nice, I think, addition.
But which was your own subjective decision. Okay, let's beam him up.
Yeah.
Beam me up, Scotty.
Yeah.
That's a little scary, actually. If I were the audience, I don't want to be brought suddenly, like amplified.
But I think it gets back to your original idea of the encouraging people on the Zoom conference to pretend that they are going to be elevated to the performance level, right? I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yes. And you just have this sort of visual evidence that you've been elevated to the level of a performer. But otherwise, you're also sort of fluidly, some artists sat in on other are there performances? So they were part of the audience and they were discussing, you know, really like one would at a salon experience, right? And also what I found really nice, I as the host, you know, as people were coming in, I would go up to people in their saucers and I'd be like, "Hi, I'm Kat," you know. And I a couple of times I noticed people looking sort of startled, like, "Oh, she's talking to me," because I think if you're somebody who's used to 3D spaces, there's not a lot of people really coming up and engaging with you. You're used to being a little bit like an invisible observer. You're just this entity that gets to move around a space. Whereas we really made it about like, let's welcome you in, come over, I'm Kat, you know, how are you doing?
I wanted to ask or to comment or ask you about something else, which struck me because I learned about your work at Sarah Weaver's conference. Was it in November or early December? And you gave a presentation there, and that also struck me, which I find interesting, that in these times where we have all this virtual performance, is that all of the things you and Heidi both thought about for the performance is like how to engage the audience more, and like a lot of your thinking was like, how do we get them to watch and stay, and a lot of what's interested me is the fact that a lot of the virtual stuff, be it live or not live, is that I can live with it. And I find like really exciting, like often I'm walking around with my little Air laptop and it's like sitting beside my stove as I'm cooking. So, I mean, I also love things that engage me, but I also love, so that's something you haven't at all thought about it in your thinking thing. And that's fun too, that you know, you can, I mean, it enables me to continue, you know, to be busy, but also see things. And I also appreciate that. But I'm interested in kind of people who conceive things for that not full attention, you know.
Yes.
So that's another thing, because if you're going to do like whatever, a classic play on Zoom, and you know, it's going to be Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, you know, you can't expect people to be cooking and to follow the text if everything is in the text. But so it's so that was just my comment, that you guys are like really interested in like, how do we bring people in and keep them there?
Yes, and thank you for pointing that out, because that is a really important aspect of the conversation. So we could have, there was a fork in the road, right? We could have also gone in the direction you described to say, okay, well, how do we create sort of performances for the sort of itinerant attention span, right?
Exactly.
And that is a perfectly legitimate mode of also exploring. And I think that there have been really beautiful experiments in that direction. Like obviously we couldn't try everything. So we went in this direction, right? We tried our question, because we also like had these very, where we started was a 1 hour performance series, you know, that was sort of really captured your attention for that 1 hour, and then everyone disperses. So we just try to stay close to that original place where we came from, which was high engagement. But yeah, I mean, one of my favorite things one of my favorite projects was actually is a recording of a play that you listen to with a partner, and it's pre-recorded. And in 1 ear you hear the dialogue, and in the other you hear instructions. So you're told what to say and how to behave, and your partner is told something else, and you're not privy to what the partner is told to do or why. And so you experience each other by being directed through a pre-recorded thing, and it's such a beautiful I think that doesn't fit in either of those categories that we just described, right? So I love the rich variety of ways that people have thought about how to like give somebody an experience.
Is there a link to that, or what's it called?
I'll look it up now if anybody wants to like comment or something.
I just, a quick question. I was also interested in the fake thing, the fake hammer and the triggering of the video, of the audio. And I wondered if it was something that you want to do in the future when it becomes available, or is it just something that you think your audience wants to do and you would never really try to attain that technically?
What do you mean?
Well,
what is
the where you pick up the person in the audience would pick up a virtual object and then throw it and then have an impact and trigger an audio sample, like the worries thing, the worries example.
Yeah. I think that I think the artists made a decision there that they didn't want to spend all the time figuring out how to make that work. And also they felt like if they were able to get it to work, it might be very spotty given the sort of the beta nature of the platform.
But eventually they want that to happen. I mean, when it becomes technically available.
Maybe they're done with their, like maybe they feel like they've made their project live its fullest life and don't need to do anything more with it. But I personally am interested in, if we get to the point where we can create some 3D objects that are custom for ourselves, what attributes might those objects have and how might one play with them in the space? And I think that would be a whole avenue of inquiry that would be quite interesting.
We have a question in the chat from Carol Kim, who doesn't have a microphone. So she says, to follow up on what Carol is talking about, is there a Truman Show moment in working in this way? Or is it irrelevant to the extent of trickery utilized?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a question for all theatrical endeavor. Like theatrical means artificial in some sense. So I think if you use your powers of artificiality for good rather than evil, right? If you are not, you're out to do certain things in a fake way in order to create an authentic experience for people, right? And if that experience feels authentic, it doesn't really matter what tricks you've used. I mean, theater also functions, you use lighting to create a certain mood, to draw a certain emotion out of people. So that is also manipulative in a way, right?
Well, I have a story about us. Like, we had our first virtual concert series in December. The next one is coming in March. And for that, we invited, we always invite composers. And a lot of them had never done any virtual concerts. Others had done many. And, we offered them a series of alternatives about what to do, saying that we would really prefer if they performed live or if there was a live component. And so for various reasons, some people didn't feel comfortable with technology or had bad internet and they recorded themselves. But what we found is that our audience liked best the concerts that they thought were live. So like two people recorded themselves because they had bad internet, but they really recorded it kind of in the spirit of doing it live for, so either they self-recorded in Zoom and stuff. And so like, then we get these comments like, oh, that wasn't live, that was pre-recorded, but people loved those. And then like some were obviously a video, and that people were less interested in. So, yeah. But that's interesting.
Yeah.
That thinking that it's live kept them there, so.
Yeah. And I think one of the earliest insights we had was that we can't compete with the production value of film and TV, where you can just, a pre-recorded thing has its own, like, you edit it very well. You have really good visuals. Like we don't have good visuals available to us over Zoom or whatever else. So a lot of these things that make a pre-recorded experience really enjoyable and engaging, those techniques were not available to us. So why try to compete with that and instead go toward something that's not pre-recorded, right?
Yeah, I've said that we're with the streaming, we get a lot of bad TV.
Yeah, exactly. It's terrible. It's like terrible lighting, terrible styling.
Get terrible framing. We have another question here in the chat.
Oh, yeah.
Another question raised in my mind: how does spatial relativity influence one's sense of engagement?
Great question. I think for me, the sense of space that the sound provided was really powerful. It created an intimacy that was just, you know, overwhelmingly beautiful. It was very satisfying to be able to move close to people and hear them loud and clear, and then move back and be able to sort of draw away and have privacy in your own conversation, in your own little hub. Yeah, it's by far the most beautiful part of these 3D space platforms.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh my God, it didn't work all morning, so I didn't think it was going to work here. But I'm just really curious about this question. Like, I've given a lot of thought to the Zoom grid and Zoom space, and how because it's one screen, it gives this illusion of contiguous space. But of course it's not. And of course, everyone's Zoom grid is different at this very moment in terms of how we are relative to each other.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've explored the other way of like sort of amplifying that and finding out how can you connect in spite of the fact that we're all rearranged subjectively. But watching your presentation, I was trying to imagine what it felt like to wander around in a nonogram, what's the shape?
Nonagon.
Nonagon. Like if Zoom right now, if this grid could we all like change into nonagons and start rearranging ourselves, would that be more satisfying? You know, like is that enough to make you feel like, oh, this is like physical space, you know, like this is, you know, like, is it enough that it just sort of, I mean, it's an illusion, and it's a poor representation of moving around in real space. I mean, they kind of like twitched like this kind of thing, you know, but is that enough to make it feel amplified and feel that you have, you know, control in proximity and intimacy, and then no, I want to stay back and be a little more anonymous or be a little less involved? Like, is that the key kind of thing? Or I don't know.
So there's two sensory triggers. There's the visual, right? And then there's the audio. So I felt like the visual was cute, but it wasn't the primary sense being engaged. And also, like, you know, unless you're a gamer and you're very used to controlling with your arrows like that, most people found it super awkward, like, and aren't experts in how to maneuver themselves through the space either. So there's quite a bit of awkwardness, and oh, I've gone too far and now I'm going through somebody else's nonagon. You know, there's a lot of sort of bloopers involved there. But the audio, I think, was the primary sense mechanism by which you felt the intimacy, my personal view. So it was this like relative audio experience that I think created the intimacy.
And how did that work? If you were close to someone and you're having a one-on-one, could you only hear each other and nobody else could hear it? Like,
yeah, that depends on how strictly the space is configured. So, and I talked to a couple of, not only the Nowhere folks, but a couple of other 3D spaces, and that is actually easy to configure. So you can make it so that you really only can hear somebody when you're like right there next to them. And the minute you go a little bit off, you're done. But what they explained was that they found it more social to let those settings be a bit looser, so that you could, you know, you like halfway away, you could still hear quite a bit, and then you had to go really far to not hear them. But I think that's configurable in the space itself, like the creators of each space can determine what they feel is the optimum level for that.
Along those lines, it sounds like an attribute for each character, nonagon. So does each character, nonagon, is programmed to have those auditory limits, right? And then, so each object has an auditory limit, but then you've got the auditory of the space itself.
Yeah. So
can you choose that as you go in?
That would be great. That would be great. It was not possible. It was not possible for our thing. We just got like a standard thing, right? A standard setting. But I think I can imagine that's not hard to implement if that seemed like a thing that many people wanted. I would imagine.
But you see the potential, Carol. What you see the potential as soon as and it's always a parallel development, in terms of the technology and in terms of the user interface. So I think down the line, these Mozilla Hubs things are pretty amazing. But then you have to look at the economy of the hubs, right? If they're going to be free or if you're going to have to rent that space, if you want that kind of space to perform in, that's a different issue.
Yeah, and it might be like a lot of these things are now like whatever Vimeo, like, oh, if you want to change the functionality of the presets, it's an extra $10. If you want to, any cousin is like, yeah, that I could totally see that coming. Yeah. There's a comment here from Keiko saying virtual experiences do not need to mimic real experiences. It's rather interesting if it gives completely different contradictory experiences that would challenge real. It would be far more interesting, according to Keiko.
Yeah, and I agree with you. We strove to find whatever intimacy was in this configuration, and it turned out not to be the same as what it is in real space. But then it was nice to note some of the things that would happen that are comparable to real space. But I think when intimacy would happen in these spaces, it was so refreshing and so remarkable because it's such a rare experience in sort of these Zoom configurations, right? So it felt novel.
Do we have any more questions from anyone, or does also now we've been with Kat for an hour and a half. So if anyone feels like talking about anything else, anything they're working on, anything they're wondering about related to live online performance, any technical questions or?
I had a question about the development time. Like what was it a long production timeline, or let's just take Sanity, for example, or a show that you did. Was it a long production time and complex, or was it easy? What was your sense?
Yeah, it wasn't, since we used everything out of the box, so we didn't try to customize anything. The actual setup wasn't that long. You could, for the first show, we only had access to the space 10 days before. So even the artists didn't see the space until just 10 days before, to give you an idea. For the second show, we had more time in the space, but I think that resulted in more success with really using the strengths of the space. So I would say we showed the artists into the space the second time about a month ahead, and they had time like to go in there. We showed everybody around for about an hour, like, here's the kinds of things you can do, and then, you know, let them go off and dream, you know, and really think about like what could they imagine, and then come back a week or two after and see, try things out that they had imagined and see what worked and what didn't.
Could they work on the spaces in the space in the hubs or in nowhere themselves, or they had to go with you?
No,
They
we
worked at home. Didn't they work at home? Yeah.
Yeah, no, but we didn't have, I mean,
I didn't go online into the space, but did they have to be accompanied by you, or could they go on their own?
no, I was just there to show them around the first time, but we were just given a link from nowhere. So it was pretty easy to let them have the link and go in there when they were ready.
You know, I also had a question because it was a partnership with Live Arts. And I wondered if that partnership was going to be developed further, or how did you like working with them? And if that kind of theater is what they are interested in now. Do you know?
So yeah, that was a very exciting thing that we were able to partner with them. We had hoped to find a partner and move out of the New Ink space, because the New Ink space is really just a little, it's a room. It's not set up with a light grid or with good sound. And we had to cart everything in there. So the hope had always been, could we find a venue, like an in-person venue that would really be our partner and take us on? And it sounds like New York Live Arts is interested in continuing that beyond these virtual experiences. So they had, was it in 2018 or 2019? They had done a program around AI and performance that was made quite it was a whole festival that got a lot of attention. And I think we were part of like the next development of that, you know, bringing in at least one component of really cutting edge technology and mixing it up with performance. So, I mean, we're still in talks, and as we develop these ideas about hybridity and hybrid forms, we are definitely hoping that the in-person the in-person venue could be the Live Arts venue.
Anyone have any other comments or questions?
I'd like to see more happen in terms of what site specificity could mean for that kind of space. You're working with spaces that are already ready-made and they're ever evolving, and the features are as well. For me, there seems to be still very much a separation of the live presence and the environment, and how could that like meld a little more, I think. And then I think also just earlier bringing up the word intimacy, I think is really important. It seems like the experiments that people are doing, no matter in what format, it seems to boil down to how can you create that for the viewer who feels so separate, you know? So anyway, I feel like I keep coming back to that in different discussions, you know? Like one of the hats I wear to earn a living is a videographer for live streaming events. And I ask myself every single time, why are we doing this? Is this really what we need to be doing right now? You know? And I feel the pain of the live performer who's like, you know, they're professionals. They know how to deliver a show and they do it. And then there's this pregnant pause afterwards because it's in an empty theater. You know what I mean? And I'm just like, is this really what we're supposed to be doing right now? You know, I don't know, you know, but in terms of being a videographer, what I keep going for is, well, what can I do since the theater is empty? Well, I can get in there in a way that I normally would not be able to and provide that intimacy and that sort of close-up relationship to the live performer. So within that realm, that's what I've been trying to do. But yeah.
But yeah, I have to say to that I mean, I know a lot of venues are doing it also to keep alive, but I have to say that often those, like say concerts and performances recorded in empty spaces are not my favorite. I find
I
often,
agree. I agree.
you know, like our first talk was John King, who was here earlier, and I love how like we see dancers in their own apartments. I find that much more exciting than a perfectly beautifully lit, you know, space that. But you know, that's my take. But
No, I agree. I agree. It's a job. But yeah.
Kat, maybe you have some upcoming events, or what are you thinking of next? Or
Oh yeah, I should. Okay, plug. The Nowhere folks have invited us to do. They are putting on their own festival now, and so they naturally invited us to be part of the festival. So we're doing probably a pretty small event that's really much more a discussion with the community than like a performance per se. But that'll be March 11th in the Nowhere space. So if you're curious about what that felt like, you could come by and hang out with us.
Do you have a link for that? You could put chat.
Yeah, I need to.
Because I bet you a lot of people here would.
Yeah. Okay, I will. So that's like talk amongst yourselves, and I'll pull up the link to it. But that's coming up, and then Heidi and I are working on a piece that we hope to show in this kind of hybrid mode that involves possibly, performers in the window of New York Live Arts as the live component, and then having the same performance represented or translated into digital space as well, so that both are happening simultaneously. We're still like figuring out how that would work, but that's one of the things we're working on, but we don't have a date yet for it.
Where are they located?
New York Live Arts, I want to say somewhere on 14th Street.
No, they're on 19th, or just
19th, yeah.
Maybe 18th Street or
West Teens.
Between 7th and 8th Avenue.
Okay.
I believe on 19th. Oh, you know what? I thought that if you guys are writing anything, I think that it would be great to read some of your some observations and your ideas about this subject. I don't know whether you're writing anything or not, or any articles, but I think that the topics that you are exploring are really interesting, in the language that would surround that kind of discussion. I think would be quite interesting.
I mean, I'm a very slow writer. I've been meaning to do a little write-up of basically what I discussed in this talk, but I'm just slow, that's all. Maybe I'll get around to it in a few months when it's no longer relevant. I don't know.
Oh, I think it'll be relevant for a while. So yeah, we can wait.
Okay.
There's slowness and there's bandwidth.
Yeah, it's a bandwidth. It's a both thing.
But here, about on another note to Carol, I want to say, have you been checking out things like OBS and stuff? Because with OBS, or now I was just in this festival this weekend called OBS Ninja. So that's like a browser version of OBS. So there, because you were talking about how in Zoom, what people see is never the same, from one, but you can control that in OBS. So if you're interested in, kind of controlling where certain things are, and to decide where they are, you could use OBS, and OBS among other things, but OBS will do it.
Well, so far I've been interested in actually playing with the Zoom architecture and kind of amplifying its quirkiness. I have OBS Ninja downloaded on my machine, but I just haven't gone there. It's like I just don't want to take on that role also, as well as performing and doing what I do. So stay tuned. Maybe next meeting we'll see where I'm at. It's like it's bandwidth again, Kat. Bandwidth.
No, but you know what's interesting? I did a performance with that, and what I've been doing I've developed in Zoom what I've been doing since well, you've seen my stuff since the pandemic, and so I'm used to it. I'm used to the Zoom interface, and it works well for me. So like when I was invited, they said like, can you do OBS? And I said, well, it's different, and you know, like I now it's become like using Zoom with the cameras has become like an instrument, and I know exactly where all the commands are, like with my eyes closed, and all my hands have different microscope cameras in them and stuff. So, you know, I asked, could I go in Zoom? And they said, yeah, sure, we can pipe you in. And so using Zoom Ninja and Zoom was no problem at all. Using OBS Ninja and Zoom was no problem at all. Whereas when I had tried the other OBS, it just like froze everything up. So that's also something that I found that interesting. So I just experienced that Friday and I had no idea. So I ran no problem on a MacBook Air, which is far from being the most powerful machine. So
sounds promising.
So that's my little tech info.
And then, Katherine, do we have upcoming things?
Our next, well, Katherine, Experimental Intermedia has the March concert series, which goes, I think, is it March 15th until 25th, I think. And we have like 8 or 9 events. And in March, we always have a lot of moving image events too. They're half moving image, half music events. So we'll be announcing that soon. And the next Zoom and OLAP will feature Ellen Perlman, who's also a very interesting kind of emerging new media artist who's been doing stuff online. You must know her, Kat, no? And
yeah, I was part of the Art Hack this summer.
Okay.
So we worked on the Battery Dance Festival pieces.
Yes,
I don't know if she's going to talk about them.
Yeah, she talk about
I was
that.
part of those. Yeah.
And then she also works with things like brainwaves and whatever, but it's interestingly like some of the stuff, she was actually in the same conference, but I've known her for ages, but she was already working with things via the virtual also before the pandemic. So yeah, so that's going to be a very interesting guest with you know, a whole other perspective on live art performance online. So that'll be
I
fun.
think she'll be very interesting. She's a great talker.
Yes,
Great,
she
yeah.
is. And that's March 14th. And what else? And what do you have coming up, Carol?
Well, I think I just want to mention that I've had a little bit of a delay getting the OLAP videos onto the Harvestworks website, but I think by the 14th we'll be able to have all of the prior videos there, so you can take a look at them, and I'll also post resources on the OLAP page, the primary OLAP page that's on the Harvestworks website. So there should be some good resources there between the comments that have been made by the speakers, the past speakers. So, and then also if you want to be on, you'll hear about all this stuff on our newsletter. So if you're not on the Harvestworks newsletter, you could sign up on our website.
But what's happening at Harvestworks?
What's happening here? We're working with UCLA on a series, a nice series that is going to highlight the David Berman Foundation collection. And if you know the David Berman Foundation, they have been funding media art since the 60s, I think. So they have quite a wonderful collection. And if you tune in, there's some pretty academic speakers that will give you a great history of the development of sound art. Yesterday, there was one on synesthesia that was quite interesting. So in the next month or so, we'll have some presentations focused on that collection. And then
Arki Huktamo? Is it?
Yes, that was yesterday.
Okay.
And then, we're getting ready for Governor's Island. We will have a ticketed exhibition that will open, I think, probably May 15th or so, which is the digital media exhibition that was postponed from spring 2020. So we've got a lot of things on Governor's Island. We'll camp there, from May through October. So we'll be doing performances and exhibitions and talks and stuff there. But I think that's it. And I think we could, unless someone else wants to mention something they're doing, we could wrap it up.
We could go have lunch or whatever.
I can get my sound back on. I'll make a quick announcement because we're doing another version of the a thing based on Sun Ra, the Sun Ra Orchestra, an old film of mine, and then a sort of play by David Soldier. Tomorrow. It's 8 on the Friedman Gallery, Friedman.com gallery. So let's get the link.
Good to know if you want to put that URL in the.
It is also archived in after. So.
I don't have it. I think you have to go to the Friedman Gallery website, and it's particular because it's a particular link, because I know last time people didn't find it. It's not in the performances, but it's in the Friedman live stream. I don't know. I don't have it. Do you have the link, Phil?
I don't think I have the exact link.
I have it because I recently visited that site. 1 second.
Oh, great.
I was looking at I was trying to find their performance series. I think it's this.
There's a Jakob Kierkegaard show that just opened yesterday. So,
was there an actual opening?
I think so.
I think part of the difficulty is it's Friedman with FRID, not FRED.
Yes.
That's why.
Yeah, that must be it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So that's past performances, but it's at. I think the link is just www.friedmanlive.com.
Right.
So.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah.
I'll see you next time.
Thank you for coming.
Thanks for coming, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
A very, very big thank you to Kat for a captivating talk.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, it was wonderful. Thank you very much for your time. It's awesome.
Oh, and Kat, including in any case, Carol and me on your mailing list.
Oh, for sure. And anyone else, feel free to.
Yes, please. If you could please include. Thank you.
Do you want to put an email, maybe even for EdgeCuts or something, where people can write to you if they want to be on your
Yeah. So here's my email, and then it's edge@edgecut.org, like that.
Thank you.
Nice series.
So send me an email, and I'll add you to that.
Great.
Carol, give me 1 second because I'm just still copying a couple of links. So.
Okay.
But actually, I'm the last one, so you guys can all leave. I'm the host, so.
Right.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you, everyone. And thank you for having me.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Take care.
Carol will be.